Divisional rivals are fun and all, but we can't forget about the animosity that transcends across the division lines. As the years continue to go by, more and more teams across the league start to develop new rivalries with different NFL teams outside of the traditional rivalry matchups that they have with their divisional foes. And just like the old school rivalries, these new ones help make the league a more entertaining place.
There are rivals.
So without further ado, let's take a look at every NFL team's most hated non-divisional rival out there. Arizona Cardinals, Pittsburgh Steelers. Despite having been around for decades as an organization, the Arizona Cardinals aren't exactly the most notable franchise in terms of traditional rivalries. Because, well, they haven't always been a particularly competitive team. That being said, they did make a nice little run at the Super Bowl a few years back with Bruce Arians, Chris Palmer, and Larry Fitzgerald. So you have to imagine that the Steelers, who upended them in the big game that year, are still their most hated non-division rival at the moment. Atlanta Falcons, New England Patriots. When it comes to the Atlanta Falcons, I'm sure I don't need to remind you all who their most hated non-divisional rival is. It all boils down to the infamous 28-3 Super Bowl. Yet another moment that solidified Tom Brady's place in NFL history and cemented the misery that Falcons fans have come to know all too well. Baltimore Ravens, Tennessee Titans. The Baltimore Ravens have been one of the most consistent franchises over the past couple of decades, and they have subsequently rallied up quite a few foes outside of divisional play. But there are few teams that look more fired up to play each other than the Ravens and Titans, who've had a few great matchups in the past couple of seasons, including 2 postseason meetings. Not to mention the near fight we saw during their regular season contest in 2020. Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs. After spending 2 decades in utter irrelevancy, the Buffalo Bills have re-emerged as one of the most promising young teams in the entire NFL. The only problem is they have another AFC neighbor who has an even more impressive young core of guys that will be quite the obstacle for Josh Allen and the rest of the Bills in the coming years. Not saying Allen isn't a potential MVP candidate going forward, but that Mahomes guy in KC is pretty darn special too. Carolina Panthers, Washington football team. The Panthers are one of the younger franchises in the league, and they haven't really been one of the most competitive. But I imagine some of the more experienced fans get riled up to see Washington come to town. After all, it is the new team of former Panthers coach Ron Rivera. Chicago Bears, Philadelphia Eagles. It's not directly the Eagles' fault that Chicago Bears enthusiasts hate Philadelphia, nor is it uncommon for a playoff loss to come and go without a rivalry being formed. But when you are subjected to the intense scrutiny and media misery of the infamous double doink, the animosity is really unavoidable. The Cincinnati Bengals, Los Angeles Chargers. Just because the Los Angeles Chargers and Cincinnati Bengals don't play all that often doesn't mean there isn't an interesting little rivalry brewing there. After all, these two teams took the 2 big-name quarterbacks off the board in the 2020 NFL Draft. Joe Burrow to the Bengals with the first overall pick, and Justin Herbert to the Chargers just 5 picks later, thus setting up what should be a fun rivalry between these two teams for years to come. Cleveland Browns, New York Jets. At first glance, this may seem like a peculiar one, but the New York Jets actually have a surprisingly intertwined history with the Cleveland Browns. Despite being in different divisions, the Jets and Browns have actually squared up in each of the last 6 seasons. And the woeful Jets embarrassed Cleveland in 2020, nearly costing them their first playoff berth in years. When you play a team this often, they really don't need to be in your division in order for that rivalry feel to develop. It just sort of happens. Dallas Cowboys, Green Bay Packers. There are some Cowboys fans who are stricken with delusions that they are really America's team that may think that they have some sort of rivalry with every other team eager to give them their best shot. Obviously, that's not the case, but the Cowboys fans do have a right to hate a few of their own torturers, like the Green Bay Packers, who eliminated them in the 2014 and 2016 playoffs. Not to mention losing 8 of their last 9 matchups against the Pack. Denver Broncos, New England Patriots. The Broncos have struggled in the post-Peyton Manning era, but during those few years, they had some awesome matchups with Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, and they even got the better of them in a few. Both franchises have lost their luster a bit, but the two fan bases still get the juices flowing when they play each other. Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns. The Lions and Browns have a sort of bizarro world rivalry, in which not only do they have some ancient history between the two sides from back in the day, but they've also toggled back and forth as to which team can be less competent in recent years. How could there not be a rivalry between the two teams to dishonorably complete a 0-16 season? Green Bay Packers, San Francisco 49ers. The Packers have had a lot of trouble with San Fran in recent years. The Niners have eliminated them in the postseason 3 times in the last decade. Plus, there was the primetime beatdown they received from Cap in Monday Night Football a few years back. Tack on the amazing rivalry the two sides had in the 90s, and this one is a shoo-in. Houston Texans, New England Patriots. While Houston may have a new non-divisional rival soon, if they end up parting ways with Deshaun Watson, there is one franchise that has absolutely tortured them over the past 10 years, the New England Patriots. Sure, this rivalry may be about as one-sided as it gets, but it's still there, at least from the Texans fans' point of view. Indianapolis Colts, New England Patriots. This one dates back a little while, but I think if you ask any Colts fan worth their weight, they will tell you that they hate the New England Patriots. Not only did New England spoil the prime of one Peyton Manning, but they've basically played Big Brother to Indy in the AFC for the past 20 years. Then there was the whole Deflategate controversy. Oh, and the ordeal with New England snaking Josh McDaniels back from Indy after they had already announced him as their new head coach. This is easily one of the most contentious non-division rivalries out there. Jacksonville Jaguars, Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Jaguars don't always make the playoffs, but when they do, they tend to own one of the NFL's most respected franchises, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They knocked Pittsburgh out of the postseason each of their last 2 appearances, and it feels like every time they play, it is a heated contest. It's pretty easy to see how some excitement has started to build around this matchup, regardless of how infrequent it may be. Kansas City Chiefs, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. While this one may seem like a bit of a recency bias, there is actually quite a rivalry that has taken form between the Bucs and Chiefs. Not only did they meet in the Super Bowl, but they also field the league's 2 most popular quarterbacks. We saw a couple of great games between Brady and Mahomes in 2020, and I personally can't wait to see the next time these two sides hit the gridiron together. It is truly must-watch TV. Las Vegas Raiders, San Francisco 49ers. There's been a weird tension with all the different Bay Area teams over the years. Most of them have played in a couple of different cities, and they have played a ton of games against each other over the years. The Raiders and 49ers are no exception, even if the Raiders jump ship to Sin City. A little not-so-fun fact just goes to show how heated this rivalry has been over the years. The two teams used to play each other every preseason, but the games just became mini wars between fans in the stands. In fact, they got so violent that the league eventually stopped their annual preseason matchups altogether after a fan was killed in a parking lot fight. Los Angeles Chargers, Los Angeles Rams. There are few figures more widely hated than landlords, and that is exactly what the Rams are to the Chargers after Stan Kroenke backstabbed them on the LA move. A move that was sure to add fuel to the fire for this West Coast rivalry. Los Angeles Rams, Green Bay Packers. What better rivalry is there than a competitive one between friends? That is exactly what we have between Sean McVay's Los Angeles Rams and Matt LaFleur's Green Bay Packers. The two head coaches are compared in the media ad nauseum. But even so, makes for compelling television whenever they meet. Miami Dolphins, Pittsburgh Steelers. While Miami and Pittsburgh may not seem like a storied rival, this is actually an interesting one. The two sides have made a couple of key deals over the past few seasons, including the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. So it'll be fascinating to see these two sides play once Tua gets up to speed. Minnesota Vikings, New Orleans Saints. While the Brett Favre era may feel like ancient history, it would probably feel a bit more recent had they made it over the hump to Super Bowl glory. You know, if they weren't ousted by the New Orleans Saints, who allegedly had a bounty program in place for that game. It's safe to say Minnesota isn't too fond of New Orleans. New England Patriots, Indianapolis Colts. No one likes a narc. That is an unquestionable fact. And that is exactly why the New England Patriots absolutely hate the Indianapolis Colts, even if they are in different divisions. The Colts snitching on New England led to Deflategate, and the $1 million fines forfeited picks and unrelenting media scrutiny that came with it. So yeah, no love lost here. New Orleans Saints, Los Angeles Rams. Now that Drew Brees has officially retired, the Saints are officially a franchise in flux. And if things go south, they'll have little to do besides remember what was. Sadly for Saints fans, the Los Angeles Rams played a pretty significant role in limiting the glory of those memories. I know Goodell and the NFL caught a lot of the flack for the missed PI call against the Rams a couple years back, but you have to think the Saints feel a certain amount of resentment towards the actual team they are facing too. New York Giants, New York Jets. These two teams may not be in the same division, but they are in the same stadium. And like most roommates who have spent any considerable amount of time under the same roof, they are none too pleased with each other. It's always fun when we get to see the two New York teams match up. New York Jets, New York Giants. Now, I know we just touched on this, but the answer rings true. The Jets and Giants have special buzz when they play. The two fan bases hate each other and have all sorts of preconceived notions about one another. Sadly for Jets fans, they've been little brother for some time now. But you have to think at some point the tide will turn for them, right? Philadelphia Eagles, Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, if you're not from the Delco area, you might not fully understand this one, but the in-state rivalry between Philly and Pittsburgh fans is beyond real. These two fan bases hate each other, and damn near every time the teams match up, there are more than a handful of scuffles in the stands. Can't help but to think that spills over onto the field with that kind of atmosphere. Pittsburgh Steelers, Dallas Cowboys. This is a little bit more of an old school one, but even so, the Dallas Cowboys and Pittsburgh Steelers rivalry lives on, especially within the fan bases. Both groups think that they are the NFL's crown jewel franchise, so they get a little riled up to go to battle. San Francisco 49ers, New Orleans Saints. The 49ers and Saints have been two of the more consistent teams in the NFC over the past few years. San Fran had a bit of a dip post-Harbaugh, but it looks like Shanahan has them back on track. They've had some heated matchups with the Saints over this stretch too, so best believe the Niners fans get a little extra juice for a matchup with the New Orleans Saints. Seattle Seahawks, Green Bay Packers. There are few matchups in the NFC more contentious than Seattle versus Green Bay. We've seen a couple of great playoff games between the two, and they have two of the premier QBs in the league in Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. What more could you want in a rivalry? Tampa Bay Buccaneers, New England Patriots. All things are good in Tampa Bay right now. Winning a Super Bowl will do that for a franchise. But things are gonna get heated when the new-look Bucs finally square up with New England, marking the first matchup between Tom Brady and his former coach of 20 years, Bill Belichick. Tennessee Titans, Baltimore Ravens. I know we talked about this earlier, but the Ravens-Titans rivalry is really looking like it could be a fun one to watch going forward. Both teams have electric running games and play a physical brand of football, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few more scuffles between these two sides over the next couple of years. Washington football team, Seattle Seahawks. Despite the rebrand, Washington has had quite a tumultuous stretch ever since Dan Snyder took over the reins. Not to say they haven't had a few bad breaks along the way, including one at the hands of the Seattle Seahawks, who broke the leg of their former franchise player RG3, essentially derailing the team for half a decade. Because of all that, the Washington faithful can't be too happy when they see Seattle come to town. Which do you think is your favorite NFL team's most hated rival outside their division? Join us in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton, and hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.